Hi, I'm Amanda Mills.
And I'm Russ Walsh.
In Mississippi, we're blessed every day to see an incredible diversity of trees. Many of us have trees that provide beauty and shade for our homes. But more importantly, trees serve as an important role in keeping our ecosystems and environment healthy. They return nutrients to the soil when they shed leaves and needles. They prevent soil erosion, help keep our groundwater clean, and provide the oxygen that we breathe. These are certainly nature's recyclers.
Our woodlands consist of many tree species that provide food and cover and shelter for wildlife and places for wildlife to rear their young. Trees are also important for our economy of Mississippi. They provide jobs for those that harvest the trees. They provide jobs for those that process them into wood products. Many of our homes and offices in Mississippi are made out of wood that are produced right here in our state.
These are renewable resources. We can grow, harvest, and replant trees to make sure that we have plenty for future generations. And we don't have to have a great deal of land to grow and enjoy trees. We can plant them around our homes and our communities. Russ, a lot of people plant trees for Arbor Day. The hunters will plant trees for wildlife, and school organizations, they'll plant it as a school project. But often we don't know exactly what type of tree to plant, when to plant it, and how exactly is the correct way to plant it.
That's right. We've already talked about how important trees are to us here in Mississippi. So if you are going to go to the extra length of planting a tree, it is important that you do select the right trees and plant them in the right way. So we'll talk about the 4 R's of planting trees. The right tree, planted in the right place, planted at the right time, and in the right way.
Russ, why don't we show how to put the 4 rights of tree planting into practice? Let's start out by choosing the right tree.
That's right. Choosing the right tree is very important. Before we even go look for a tree, what do we want? Do we want a shade tree? Do we want one that has pretty fall foliage? Do we want one that's going to provide food for wildlife? Do we want a fast-growing pine to cover up the neighbor's house or something like that? So we really need to determine what kind of tree we want first.
So it's very important to, first of all, choose a native tree.
That's right. The native trees in Mississippi they're going to grow a lot better. If you're talking about like an oak tree, it should produce and grow better on the right site. So certainly choosing native trees is important. And also, a lot of trees that are out there today can be invasive species. So they can be a detriment to our wildlife habitat, or they can encroach in our yards where we really don't want them. So it's really important to choose native trees in Mississippi.
Russ, what about the right place?
Well, after we've chosen the right tree, we need to determine what site we're on. Maybe we're on an upland sandy site, so maybe a pine tree would do better there, or maybe a red oak would do there, a site that's going to be more adapted to somewhat of a more dry site. Let's say we have a low-lying site that's going to be a little more wet. Maybe something like a nuttall oak or a white oak would do better in those type of sites. So we need to determine kind of what our soil conditions are. Is it wet or is it dry? And that'll kind of help us pick the right tree. We certainly don't want to go down in a wet, low-lying area and try to plant a pine tree. It's probably just not the best choice.
But it's also important to make sure that you don't plant a tree under a power line or on top of a utility line. Russ, what is the right time to plant a tree? Is there any one time better than the other?
Typically planting in the dormant season or the winter months is the best time. You have good soil moisture, the trees are dormant at that time, and as soon as springtime comes, they'll start putting on root growth and start putting on growth. Whereas if we waited till later in the spring or early summer, they may be more stressed, they may require more water, so they may not have as good a survival. So really the winter time is the best time to do it.
Russ, let's talk about some of the tools that you use for tree planting.
Depending on what kind of tree you have, most everybody's got a common tool that they can use. Got a set of post hole diggers there. Let's say you have a tree that you bought that's in a pot. It's got a pretty good root system. You may have to dig a bigger hole. A set of post hole diggers would be perfect for that. Or a shovel like this. You can, if you're on some ground that's fairly easy to dig in, you can use a common shovel like this to dig a hole. Or if you have like some bare root pine trees or small hardwood seedlings that don't have a big root system, this is a dibble bar, a common dibble bar that we use to plant trees. This would be perfect to plant those pine trees or those small hardwood trees. So any of these common tools most people have and be well suited to plant trees.
Russ, we're at the last R, the right way to plant a tree. We have 3 different trees with us, and let's first start out with the bare root pine. Russ, let's talk about planting the bare root pine using a dibble bar.
First, just take your dibble bar, put it down in the ground, and kind of work it back and forth and make a big enough hole to put the seedling in. important thing to remember when planting the pine is you want to make sure the hole is deep enough so that when you put the pine in, you don't do what we call J-rooting. That's where the root will turn back up towards the surface of the ground. The tree will die if we do that. So we want to make sure the root system goes straight down into the ground. Once you put the tree in the hole, just put your dibble bar back a little bit and push forward, and you just seal the tree in the ground, and you're ready to move on to the next one. Another important thing to remember with the pine is not to get it too deep. If you cover up that terminal bud with dirt, it'll also kill the tree. We've also got a bare root hardwood here. There's not a whole lot of root mass, so this one can be planted with a common dibble bar or just with a small shovel dug hole.
Russ, now let's talk about planting the bare root hardwood.
If you get trees like this, most of them, if they have a smaller root system like this, can be planted with the common dibble bar. You do probably have to dig a little bit bigger hole once you get your dibble bar in the ground. You do want to work it back and forth. Make sure you get big enough hole for this root system. If you were to get a hardwood like this, it's got a little more broader root system on it, you could take the sharpshooter like we showed earlier and dig a little bit bigger hole and plant it with the sharpshooter. Just work your hole back and forth. Same way with the pine, make sure that you don't J-root it, make sure the root goes straight down into the ground. And you want to stop pushing it in the ground just to where the top of the last roots are going to be covered up by dirt. There again, just like with the pine, just put your dibble bar behind it, push down, and seal it up.
And what about this tree?
Here we've got a container hardwood. These are a tree that you may get at a nursery or from a Arbor Day. It's going to be a little more labor intensive to plant this one, but we'll show how to plant this one with a post hole digger.
Russ, now let's talk about planting a potted tree.
Sure. Well, here we have a potted Nuttall oak. We've dug a hole about 1.5 size times the width of the tree here. When you have a tree that maybe has been in a pot for a year or two, sometimes it'll happen. What we call it'll be root bound. So when you get the whole mass out of the pot, before you put it in the ground, maybe just kind of break up the dirt, break up the root system, so that when you do put it in the hole, those roots are able to spread out in that hole a little bit. You also want to make sure you don't get these too deep in the ground. Make sure that the top of your pot or top of your tree is about level with the ground. You just cover it back up with dirt and kind of pack it in there tight, and you're ready to go.
Russ, we covered the 4 R's, planting the right tree in the right place at the right time in the right way.
Ready for your turn?
I'm ready.